Welcome to another episode of One Idea Away, where we're committed to living more fully, deeply, and consciously. Why? Because when we do, we're calmer, we're clearer, we're more connected, more joyful, and much more alive. On this show, we bring you stories of those that are figuring it out just like us, as well as experts who can shed light on the hows and the whys all of this stuff works. So I want to thank you all for tuning in and sharing and reviewing our show. If you haven't done so yet, please drop us a review. Also, subscribe to the podcast on our feed, whether it's on iTunes or whatever app you happen to be using. And if there's something that stands out in the show, do us a favor. If it makes you think of somebody, share it along, because this show is meant to get the conversation started, not just to drop in for a little inspiration. So with that, let's turn to this week's episode. Finally, it's finally here. And today I get to announce and tell you about Uncover, a retreat to create the life of your dreams. Uncover is a 3-day retreat being hosted by One Idea Away. I'm going to be there leading and facilitating the retreat, along with IPEC founder and best-selling author Bruce Schneider. We've secured the beautiful Asilomar Conference Grounds in California, just a 90-minute ride from the Bay Area, for January 18th through the 20th. And then we're going to be at the Garrison Institute in New York, just 50 miles north of the city, sitting atop the bluffs of the Hudson River on March 29th through the 31st. In this retreat, we're going to guide you through the Uncover process. You can actually learn more about that in the book, Uncovering the Life of Your Dreams by Bruce Schneider. And you're going to learn and experience a variety of mindfulness activities, share and connect as a community, and learn through practices and dialogue in a supportive and, yes, judgment-free zone. You see, this is about closing the gap between who you know yourself to be and how you're currently showing up in life. You see, that gap is part of the tension that any of us can feel in our hearts and minds, because you know there's something more for you to experience, to enjoy, to share, and to contribute. You may feel as if who you are is covered up by your responsibilities and circumstances and priorities, and we don't want to see anyone lose any more years of their lives not being who they fully and truly are. It's time for that to end, and over these 3 days it will. You will uncover your personal path to happiness, freedom, and aligning with your true desires. I cannot wait to meet you in person. I can't wait to spend the time with you over these 3 days. It's going to be an extraordinary experience. Just go to oneideaaway.com/retreat. That's oneideaaway.com/retreat. I promise you, you will never forget this experience. So I don't know if everybody knows this about me. The part you probably know is the fact that I am an entrepreneur. What you may not know is I am the grandson of an entrepreneur. I am the nephew of multiple entrepreneurs and the cousin of entrepreneurs. I'm the son of an entrepreneur. And yes, as I mentioned, I'm an entrepreneur. And when I went into small business and had my own businesses, I have a partnership that I'm in the middle of right now with the Institute of Professional Excellence and Coaching, as well as One Idea Away. I went into this endeavor. I went into this journey thinking that entrepreneurialism was about having freedom. Freedom of your schedule. And that's just delusional unless you're intentional about the process, meaning that you can absolutely have that freedom as an entrepreneur, but you just simply cannot take it for granted. And the reason being is that you get incredibly busy as a business owner. You just start to let that start to dictate the response you need to have for your customers, your vendors, your employees, your team. You got to go out and get business, and you got to take out the trash. So it's kind of an all-encompassing thing. And if you're not intentional, if you're not conscious about what you're doing, it can just absolutely monopolize your schedule. And that's when we start to get distracted from some of the really important things in our life. And that distraction, as you have heard me talk about on this show, is that it turns over into a sense of disconnection. Now, most of the time, we actually usually spend these chats talking about disconnection from self, all the different ways that we kind of blind ourselves from who we truly are and the gifts, the talent, the purpose, the mission that we are really truly meant to have in this world, and how does that get clouded over? That's a big part of what we chat about. I want to flip it a little differently and talk about the connection with others that actually gets compromised through this similar type of process, because we're not going to just chat about entrepreneurs today. We're going to talk about everybody, because frankly, everybody is completely overscheduled and overbooked, and we're just not intentional about taking that back the way that we can. And when we lose that connection with others, more often than not, that means that we start to lose our connection with our family and with our children. And that is something that I can promise you 20 or 30 years from now, when you look back, if you did not change that course and you missed that opportunity, missed that time to spend with your kids in a very important and meaningful and quality way, that is something that you're going to regret. And so that's really what I wanted to focus on in today's conversation and see where we go. So what did we do? We went out and we've got Jim Sheils with us today because he's referred to as Crazy Glue for Families, or the Family Guy, along with his wife, Jamie. And they are on a mission to revolutionize family life. They want to help you enjoy your family more than the average parent, balancing success at work with success at home. Jim's on a clear mission in this lifetime, which is to deepen relationships and improve education for entrepreneur families. His popular Family Board Meeting book, a truly, truly wonderful book and wonderful strategy, and the powerful 18 Summer Strategy have helped parents worldwide reconnect with their children in fun and experiential ways. And by creating the education matrix, Jim is also helping to change our educational system and better prepare our children for the more practical affairs of life. So we went out and we got the Family Guy. And with that, Jim, I want to thank you so much for being here on One Idea Away.
Thanks for having me, Luke. It's great to be here.
You got it. You know, one of the things, and I think it's when I started to dive into this book, and some of your work and talks and things like that, I think the thing that surprised me was I started to think, okay, we're going to get into the board meeting right away, and what is this, and what's going to be the strategy? And instead, your story started more with supporting a friend at a detox clinic. And I was hoping if you could take us there, because that was just an eye-opener in terms of what's going on out there.
Yeah, that was an eye-opener for me. And unfortunately, addiction has not gotten better in the U.S. It's gotten worse.
Yeah.
And I think what we're talking about today here, overscheduling, as much as people don't want to do it, the hard look at it, I think it's having a direct correlation. And years ago, it was a slap in the face, as I think I said in the book, where I went to a meeting with a group of family and close friends that were trying to support a number of young kids young teenagers and young adults in detox. And something happened as we were sitting there. You went into a room. I was the only friend in the room for this, and then there were a bunch of parents. And unplanned, it ended up that every parent in there owned a successful business.
Wow.
And all of them, as things started to unwind and discuss what happened, and you're seeing grown men cry over pictures of their young daughter who's now an adult and they barely recognize because of addiction, that the lack of quality time was a common thread.
Yeah.
And being in that room, and a lot of people were arguing, saying, well, if I hadn't built the business, I wouldn't be able to afford this detox clinic.
Right.
And so it's saying which came first, the chicken or the egg. And I literally left that day not really understanding what I had just gone through.
Yeah.
And I wrote in my journal, there is absolutely no substitute for quality time. Yeah. Not money, not fancy private schools, nothing. You cannot delegate yourself out of family life, because young adults, as much as they will act like they don't, they need connection.
Yeah.
And if they're missing that, it opens up these roads for a higher likelihood of that. So it was a powerful day in my life that I never thought would be directing me into the work that I do now, but it was a very big part of it, Luke.
It's something I know I've gotten into in a couple of different shows in the past, is that we used to be a society that had a very different level of kind of family support and communal support. And so those different times when we were busy in our lives, it was kind of easier to rally around the kids and what attention did the family need and what quality time did they need at any given time. We're not there anymore. No. Everybody's right. We don't have a support system. We're all completely overbooked. And so what you're talking about is something that's affecting both families as well as communities. And we don't even have the traditional support systems. At least most of us do not have the traditional support systems that generations past had. And so we don't have the safety net. I think that. No. And so one of the other phrases you used as part of this, and man, talk about something, another kind of slap in the face of something that I've heard, I've said through the years. I do this for my family. I'm doing it for you. How false is that?
Well, there's this badge of honor, and we all have heard about it. For entrepreneurs go into their work because they've been promised certain freedoms. Freedom to make as much money as they possibly decide to, freedom to choose their schedule, freedom to be able to do things that they might not have been able to do as kids with their own families. And the problem is we get so wrapped up in our work and hyper-focused that we start running up that entrepreneurial mountain so hard, so fast, with the best intentions. We look around and our family could now view us as strangers. But we justify it saying, we're doing it for you, we're doing it for you. Someday you'll understand. The problem is, and we'll talk about 18 Summers, is someday never comes, and children especially don't understand. You cannot delegate yourself out of family life for the first decade and expect them to understand and there not to be a disconnection. Yeah. You have to integrate your business into your family life now. Not in 5 years when the business hits this benchmark, but now. And that's where I really got into the 18 Summers movement and the power of rhythms. But we lie to ourselves with not trying to be bad. It's usually with the best intentions. And we truly believe that, gosh, I am doing this for you. You're going to be able to attend a school that I never could. You're going to be able to go places I never did. We're going to be able to live in an area where I never could. Yeah. I get it. But there has to be a better balance and integration. And balance is a tricky word. I understand it. But you cannot, in the attempts to build a business, Luke, delegate yourself completely out of family life. Yeah. It is the kiss of death.
It's we want to be able to delegate as entrepreneurs. Family cannot be one of those things. And I think there's kind of two things. One, I wanted to bring up because I started to mention it in the intro, is that while you and I are very much talking from an entrepreneurial standpoint, because that's kind of our background and we're tied to that from a family standpoint, and yet at the same time, I know of very few people in my life and friends and family and everything else who are not entrepreneurs who basically don't have the same issue. It's kind of omnipresent across so many different walks of life, and it is something that we and the advantage and disadvantage of some of the technology and being wired in and everything else. Well, that allows us certain freedoms in terms of maybe there's telecommuting or virtual work or things that previously were not as accessible as they are today. Obviously, we know the complete imbalance that can also bring, which sways it over. So I just wanted to acknowledge for everybody, this is not only entrepreneurs. We certainly recognize how pervasive this is. The second one, though, is where I wanted to come to it as well in terms of this, which is that how much do we need to recognize as parents that so much of what we're doing it for in our minds and the story that's there, very well intentioned, the better place to go to school, the better possible career path, the better neighborhood to live in or what have you. How much of that is it that we're doing it for our kids or we're doing it for ourselves, trying to solve something that is in our past?
And that's a very powerful question, Luke. And a lot of the time, me being an entrepreneur, and whether you're an entrepreneur or a professional or an executive, if you have a career, normally a career for a lot of us, if we've come from humble beginnings, there is a proving ground. Yeah. There is a something different you're seeking within yourself. Yeah. And you're fighting so hard for it. And your family's almost going, "Oh, why are you fighting so hard for this?"
Yeah.
Don't you understand? And how could they? They weren't there 30 years ago when you were a young kid in the 5th grade or whatever, going through certain things. And so I would say, Luke, half the time, at least half the time, it's exactly what you're saying, where there's something inside us that's driving that. And we've masked it unintentionally to say we're doing it for the family. And the thing that I've understood, which should be very reassuring for a lot of people out there, at least was for me, it's not the big business or even the large perks that they want. It's you they want. Yeah. Now, they can't even express that. They can't even explain that. They might not even fully consciously realize that. But when you really start to reflect back and dig deep, like I have in 3-day retreats in different situations, it's really the connection with you they want. They could do with without some of those perks. If you're saying, well, if I work a little less or if I change things, then you can't have those. Yeah. And really, when it comes down to it, most times I've seen them go, well, the hell with that. We want you. Yeah. And that should be really reassuring. That should be really encouraging for a lot of people out there.
Yeah. And again, I raise this as one of those questions, not because it produces bad things per se, meaning, again, it's very well intentioned. You can make extraordinary progress for your family. Nothing wrong with any of it. Just do it with eyes wide open. Know what you're right. Know the motivation behind it, so that if you need to course correct, like what we're talking about, and recognize what may be even more important in your life, you can make sure that you place that center stage, just as you've placed your business at times or your career at times center stage.
Exactly. And I am the last person, Luke, to discourage ambition.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm a very driven entrepreneur, but what I'm saying is the old lie that you have to sacrifice everything, delegate yourself out family life is just simply not true in any career. There are ways to set certain powerful rhythms in place to keep you steadfast at home along the way.
Yeah. It's, and I think it's part of the reframe. And then I want to switch more to, kind of the how do we build this connection side of things. But it's the recognition that the reason why most of us really truly went towards entrepreneurialism or that type of a business, that type of an endeavor, is that we wanted it to serve our life and a lifestyle that we wanted to be able to have. And very often it ends up getting flipped, where now the life is the business, as opposed to the business was meant to serve the life. And that's really where I think you're helping people begin to bring greater focus to that bigger picture of, okay, this was meant to be one piece. It was meant to be a great vehicle for you to be able to do all of this. Now let's look at this whole picture, and very specifically the most personal and intimate and powerful relationships that you're going to have for your lifetime. And how can we make sure that this is something that you do not lose sight of, and that's a major part of your life that we build around. And so I guess, and so if, as we do that, you're talking about this real sense of connection with our children. I was hoping you could just speak to, define that for us, right? Now, I know it may seem a little obvious for everybody out there, but I think there's so many different levels and layers of what we think is connection or spending time with people. And it's a lot more deep. It's deeper than that. Yeah.
Well, and the word connection is luckily not become an overused buzzword, but I believe in it wholeheartedly. I was at an event a few years ago that my friend was hosting called One Last Talk, my friend Philip McKernan, and beautiful middle-aged woman, successful, told an incredible story where she had overcome odds around addiction. And I'll never forget the line she said, and she said, the opposite of addiction is connection. And after the story we just shared and hearing that, I thought, oh my gosh, how important is that? I want to be on the far side where she's speaking of. And connection is not the rush talk at the at the breakfast table where two people are on their phone running the other way, the dog's barking to get out. Connection is not driving the kids to soccer practice where they're screaming in the back and not really. There are certain levels of true quality time where you have to set the stage for, where you actually get below the surface. No one really wants to live on the surface. Like Luke, and I always joke on stage, shoot me now if all we're going to talk about is the weather for the next 70 years. Like,
absolutely.
Please, no. Like, we don't want that with our kids. When you really get down to it, you want to know, how can I really support you? How can I have your back? How can we have more fun together? How can we have more connection? And there are ways to do that and ways not to. And what I found is in the rush, like you were talking about, so busy, so rushed, there might be a cordial friendliness to our brief interactions, but it's not true connection. It's not true communication. It's not talk below the surface. And those things are really needed to steadfast and really deepen the relationships especially within family and children.
Yeah. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about kind of how to go about doing this in just a little bit. But I think kind of the two things that you're bringing up is, number one is it takes a little bit of time. Right. I think you even refer to, I forget the exact word that you used, but you need to be able to unwind. Decompress, I think, was one of the words that you use, right? You need that time where if it is a quick 5-minute conversation, it's not to say that you can't have quality time in 5 minutes, but it's just to say in the usual hustle and bustle of our day, 5 minutes is, we don't slow down long enough in 5 minutes. Like 5 minutes might be 4 minutes of 49 seconds of distraction to have 11 seconds to even pay attention to what was going on. So it takes a little time to unwind, to get into that more comfortable space. And I think the other thing, which you describe in terms of that quality time, is to be present with the person that you're with. And
which is easier said than done, and now in the world nowadays with a quick ping of the text or this, we're too connected. You have to disconnect to reconnect, and that's one of the only ways to stay present. And presence is such a gift once you truly give it to your kids, and unfortunately, me included. Once you talk to people and you really start to question, and I give them a set of questions like, when you're communicating, does this happen? Does this? And they realize, oh my gosh, I've been so distracted, not really there for so long. I didn't even realize it.
Yeah. It's unreal. I mean, we really do not fully comprehend, most of us do not really fully comprehend the Pavlovian experiment that we've become with our phones. I mean, it's ping and we're ready for food. We're ready to look at the notification, the email response, the Facebook post, whatever it happens to be. It's amazing. And there's so much of that within our environment. It's not even just our phones. It's even more pervasive. That said, before we get into the actual family board meeting, because I really want to talk it through, I left a line. You referenced it, but I left a core line out of your introduction, and it had to do with 18 summers and what that actually means. And I was hoping you could elaborate on that, because that, again, yet another one, you talk about 18 summers, and it's like, oh, man, yeah, I can't unsee that. I can't unhear that.
Yeah. Oh, it stuck with me. The day that it was taught to me by a mentor of mine, it never left. Yeah. And he was a mentor of mine, a speaking coach, successful entrepreneur in his early 70s. Phenomenal shape, great guy. And he literally just stopped and said, let me tell you, you were onto something with teaching this, because if you remember nothing else, remember this. You got 18 summers. You have 18 summers. Look, my daughters are still my daughters. They're grown. We're still close. But I'm telling you, Jim, it's different. Yeah. You got to do the math. The stats are staggering of how much less time you have with them once they leave for their own adventure after the age of 18. Yeah. He's like, grab those 18 summers. I'm telling you, I did. It's the best thing I ever did. If it cost me business, who cares? Yeah. He's like, take hold of that time. And that always stuck with me, that, because that takes over the entrepreneurial lie. Like, someday they'll understand. Well, you only have 18 summers. So, and it's really 18 seasons. And what that does, that simple math equation, Luke, gives us some positive motivation, gets us kind of off of our relationship rears, and says, man, we don't have forever. Someday won't come. We need to do things now. Every day counts. Every season counts. And when you put it into those terms, that simple math equation of 18 summers has helped more families, just that one thing, than any of the other work I've ever done. Yeah, I mean, it is truly just that notion and that clarity of 18 summers, and they're into a completely different phase of their life, and you're not going to get that time back. We hear it, but we don't always quantify it. 18 summers to me quantifies it, and it's it's all like crossing the day off of a calendar. What's going on. So from that standpoint, then, as part of the 18 summers and that type of perspective and that type of notion, you originally kind of burst onto this path with your strategy, your focus on the family board meeting. Explain that, because it was, again, one of those funny terms that I'm like, family board meeting. Okay, I'm picturing one thing, and then I heard you explain it, and I'm like, oh, that is so much better. Yeah, it's exactly, and it's a play on words. It always has been. Yeah. But about 8 years ago, I went through a really powerful time in my life, a point of critical that changed me on the relationship side of my life forever. I was going through the beginning processes of being approved to donate a kidney to my father, and I was in the process of adopting my two oldest sons. I have 4 children. The 2 oldest are adopted, biological. That means nothing to me. I love them all the same, and there's no difference once you go all in with a child. Yeah. But I was in the process of adopting 2 young boys. My wife and I fell in love instantly. We had so many things, core value-wise. I could tell you crazy stories. And when I got the chance to win her heart, I got the chance to win the heart of these 2 beautiful little boys. They were 7 and 5. My wife was married young in college to a high school boyfriend. Very terrible situation. She stood up for herself, got out of it, got full custody of her sons. And I met her a few years later when she was running a Waldorf preschool. But I was running 2 large businesses, Luke, when I met her. And these little boys, when you come into their life at 7 and 5, how am I going to, first of all, break down the walls of distrust that they had built for good reason? And how was I going to integrate, my business almost went bankrupt in '08. I was a heavy real estate investor in California and Florida. It was World War III for me from about 2008 through 2009 into 2010. So it's, how was I going to, keep reviving and growing the business, but also connect with these young boys? So that's how it all started with the family board meeting. And literally, I don't even think I talked about this in the book. It's funny, but I gave them quality time coupons our first Christmas together. And they were, and I said, look, I am so honored to be in your life and so excited. I want to make sure that I'm spending time. So we're going to have these quality time coupons. Here's 4 for the year. And you guys have a day every quarter. And a quarter didn't mean anything to them. I said, so every few months, you guys have a day. Now we're going to spend lots of time in between that, but this is just your day with me. My phone goes off, and I basically explained the board meeting strategy. And that's where the family board meeting strategy came from. Yeah. And again, a board meeting to me is, you hear about companies having, board meetings. It's, a time where you have a quarterly board meeting, you get your teams together and you review the last 90 days, reunite the team and look ahead to the next 90 days. That's what my board meetings are with my kids. It's an important meeting about them. And it's a day a quarter that, and I'll explain the whole system, that is just for them. And it does just that. It regrounds us, reunites us, makes us look ahead to the next 90 days. And it's been so powerful. And I'm sure do you want me to tell the story in the book about my son, which inspired this all?
Please.
It was, yeah. So when I came into Jamie's life, again, we were so meant to be. And winning her heart, the boys came into my life, but there were trust issues, and they've been hardest on my oldest son, Alden. When I first came into Alden's life when he was 7, he was a terrible student, close to failing. He had been put on the spectrum at school for autism, and he suffered every night from night terrors. And if you don't know what those are, people out there, they're awful. It's when your child wakes up for hours at a time, sometimes screaming and absolutely terrified. It can take you a long time to put them to sleep. It's terrible for everyone. Now, I knew these things could change. Luke, I'm a clueless optimist sometimes, where I just said, no, these things can change. And so I just started to set these rhythms, and probably the most powerful was this simple family board meeting strategy, these quality time coupons, where we just started to spend time together, where I know there's a time for therapy and medication. I didn't think this was the time. This was time for me to step in as the role that I had never played to that point as a father figure, although I was not even being called dad at that time yet. I've since adopted the boys, but and just to be there for trust and fun and engagement. Yeah. And Luke, within 1 year, Alden went from failing to getting this little award as the most improved student of the 3rd grade. He was beaming. They retracted the diagnosis of autism and admitted it to be a mistake. It wasn't autism. I knew it wasn't. It was stress related from things that happened before, outside of, his hands, my wife's hands, that he could overcome, and he did. And most rewarding to me, Luke, within a year, the night terrors were gone. Now, I would have given my entire real estate portfolio for those results, but I didn't have to. What I did was I stepped in where I was needed, and I didn't try to delegate. I didn't try to hand off to a therapist or medication. And I'm not saying those things are wrong, but that's not what my son needed. And man, you look at him today, 8 years later, you wouldn't recognize that same kid. I mean, he is a big, strong, 6', exercising with me, surfing with me, avid fisherman, good artist. Like, you would never recognize the old Alden who I came into his life. Yeah. And that has only reiterated what I learned that day in that detox support group. There's no substitute for quality time. Yeah. Not money, not fancy private schools.
Well, and I think part of what you're highlighting in what unfolded, which is really just a great example, but also just an extraordinary part of your own journey, your own story with your son Alden, is that when you are in connection with your children and you're spending that quality time, there's 2 major things that begin to unfold: safety and trust, right?
Big time.
And those 2 things are so important to our psychological and emotional, spiritual, social well-being. There's all sorts of different studies that come from how much we can flourish when we feel that safety, security side of our lives taken care of. And then we do come more out of our shells, and we are more expressive, and all of these wonderful creative things start to emerge. And that's what you're creating the space for with this type of a strategy. That's, kind of the bedrock, the beginning. And if you could take us a little bit through that family board meeting strategy in terms of how do we structure this? What does that really truly look like? Because to me, it was so much simpler than, we make it out to be. We complicate things in just so many unnecessary ways. And this was a simple way, but it's a simple way that does create that safety and that trust and that deeper bonding. And then things just kind of flourish from there.
Absolutely. And it creates consistency. And
Yes.
especially for driven executives, entrepreneurs, we're not always consistent in those in these things. We want to be, but the next thing we know, holy cow, it's October and I'm feeling disconnected from my family. Yeah. These rhythms save us from ourselves and ground us and keep us consistent and connected. Mm-hmm. And that's what, again, I had a friend who wrote a book called Napkin Wisdom, where you can write a great idea on the back of a paper napkin and follow it. That's what this strategy is. That's why I love it. So many people have understood it, taken hold of it, and continue to do it 4, 5, 6, 7 years later, every quarter. And that's all it is. Every quarter, I have a quote-unquote board meeting with each of my children. And whether you want to call it daddy-daughter date or father-son time, that doesn't matter to me what you call it, but just do it. And what it looks like is this: uninterrupted for at least 4 hours with 3 guiding principles. First one is one-on-one. Second one is without electronics. The third is a fun activity with focused reflection. And when you put those 3 together, which I can go through how they work together, is the peanut butter and jelly of deepening relationships and staying connected with your kids. And it's worked for now thousands of families. Yeah. Thousands of families. For entrepreneurs that, frankly, not to put myself down, I go, I can't believe I'm getting an email from this person that, I've read about in Newsweek or something saying, hey, I just want to let you know I've used this. And I mean, it's shocking. But if you help someone with their family, even for you people out there that have employees, you help them get more connected with their kids. Yeah. Man, you want to see more productivity, more loyalty, more results, that's going to happen.
Absolutely.
But if you want me to explain,
please.
The first one, you know how we overlook the obvious, like as you were just kind of hinting at, the solution doesn't have to be as complicated as we made the problem. When people say, give me the one hack, and I don't like that word because I think with your relationships, you want mastery. But if you really want a hack, get one-on-one. That's the first rule of ours. There is so few actual focused one-on-one time, and you got to separate the parts to strengthen the whole. So if you get one-on-one with your kids, it puts the magnifying glass over the relationship in a positive way. That is absolutely key. And when you start to really interview people or work with people like I have, and you say, well, when was the last time you were one-on-one for 4 hours? And they're going, oh my gosh, I don't think I ever have. I have 3 kids, 4 kids. We're running all over. I have time together, but never one-on-one time. One-on-one time gets you below the surface. So that's absolutely the first building block of this strategy. Yeah. The second one is without electronics. And there's so much out there, and I talk a little bit about the science in there. A very nice man, Dr. Ned Hollowell, actually helped us some with this strategy. He was with Harvard Medical School for 10 years, leading expert in ADHD, been on Oprah, all the show, like brilliant guy, loving family guy. And he talks about what over electronic stimulation is actually doing to human connection. Yeah. And this is not hokey pokey. This is pure science. Yeah. You got to disconnect to reconnect. And that's why I make the rule of no electronics on a board meeting. None. Not my phone, not that. You can go off. What I do allow is airplane mode to take one picture because I like to commemorate each one. It's been cool to watch them yearbook through the years now. Yeah. But if you turn off your phone, because think about it, Luke, you're on a board meeting or I'm on with my son. I get one annoying text of a deal that I've been working on and something falls through, an emergency happens, and you take that text or phone call, you've just proven that is more important than the most important relationship right in front of you. Yeah. You gotta disconnect to reconnect. I like to call it intermittent tech fasting. If you can't, intermittent fasting is a great health strategy now. A lot of health experts and fitness experts I know are using it. I've used it. Yes. This is the same thing. You are disconnecting and reconnect. You're having an intermittent tech fast. And that gives you, again, full focus, almost like the crickets finally are being heard, where you can, there's no distraction between either one of us. You're not sitting at the lunch table on this board meeting. You're taking the kid's on a game, you're on a email thread, whatever. Those all go away. So without electronics. And then the third part of this strategy is fun activity with focused reflection. Now, fun activity with focused reflection is the shortest definition in the world for experiential education. And I love experiential education. I'm kind of an alternative education fanatic. I love it. I want our kids to learn better than we did. And this has been proven to be the most powerful form on the planet. You're just using it now to help get closer to your kids. And one of the key things here is a fun activity of their choice. So they choose the day. That gets them buy-in. That gives them creativity. You want to know what they're passionate about? Give them the chance to plan a day. You're going to start to learn pretty quick what they really care about. Yeah. And by doing that, you're not overstepping your authority. See, a lot of times we think we know it all. And you say, well, I'm going to take my son to a football game. You sit there and at the end of the day, you punch yourself in the arm and say, oh, I'm so glad we bonded. And deep down, he doesn't really give a crap about football. He likes antique cars or he likes fishing. It has to be their choice. And then all focus reflection is spend time at the end of the day talking. Yeah. It's really that simple. Every 90 days, uninterrupted for 4 hours, get one-on-one without electronics, doing a fun activity of their choice, and spend time at the end to talk, to have a focused reflection. Ask, what was the favorite part of the day? What's going on in your life? Now, I talk about in the book a couple things that I want to note right now because I'm saying, why is this not going to work for people? First, it's not going to work because you don't schedule it, and that which we schedule gets done. Put this on the schedule like it's your biggest investor or client in your business, and it will happen. And secondly, this is not a time to lecture your kids. We all have our next 50 lectures of how they need to improve their life and start to take it more seriously. If you do that, you have just killed connection. The magnifying glass has been shattered, and they're not going to want to do these anymore. This is a day to say yes. It's time to put things aside if they got in trouble at home or in school. This is a time to be their friend. We're the no men or the disciplinarian all the other times. This is about fun and connection and open communication and being vulnerable. Don't plan 50 lectures. You will ruin the moment. Yeah.
There's just kind of two quick things I wanted to add to this, and then I wanted to come back to something you mentioned before we wrap ourselves up today. One is, again, I want to, just re-mention how important it is to take 4 uninterrupted hours. We're not talking about, 30 minutes. Okay. You got to spend some time and, just think about, the last time you went on vacation, right? We go on these 7 days vacation. Were you relaxed in the first 2 hours you went on vacation? No. You're still unwinding from everything that you've tried to leave back at the office or back in life or whatever. It takes a period of time to decompress, as we were talking about before. So those 4 hours are really important, and it allows us to also decompress and let our guard down a little bit to sink into the moment of where we are. And I think the really important part about what you were also describing in terms of your child choosing the activity, you can not only does it create that autonomy, meaning that they get to choose, it gives them a little bit of that type of buy-in. And I think the other point, which I just don't want to lose, it gives them the chance to invite you into their world.
Yeah.
Right. So now So they're opening up to say, hey, come look at me. Come look at my world. Come look at what I'm interested in. And so now it's both choice and invitation. And that's why, to your point about don't use that time to lecture, you don't go to somebody's house and lecture them on, how they've decorated their home. You don't do that when somebody's invited you over. Well, you don't do the same thing with your kids. If they invite you in, be there with them. Be there as a guest. Be there in wonderment. Be there in curiosity. Get to see what it is that they see and what they experience, and just connect to them at that level. You're going to learn so much more about your kids. And when it comes time to have the lecture, days, weeks, months, years later, it's going to be heard differently because you were just there with them and they know that they've been seen.
Yeah. Well said. Well said.
Obviously, you can tell, Jim, I also very much appreciate the work you're doing out there because I think it's so incredibly needed right now. The one idea I wanted to come back to that I didn't want to lose is you mentioned a few times the idea of rhythm and the power of rhythms. And I didn't want to kind of let that slip through this conversation because I think that's also a really important part of all of us kind of understanding what's going on here.
Yeah, rhythms. And again, I'm a huge believer in mentors. I've had some great ones in my life. And one of mine who is worth a lot of money, 5 kids, has dinner at home 6 nights a week. And he said, Jim, rhythmize your life around your most important relationships. And what's cool is he said that. And now he actually practices the family board meeting strategy with his kids. So nice. It's reciprocated. It's so cool how that happens with relationship building. And I took that to heart. And what I've figured out is rhythms. I love that word because I don't like the word habits. You can have a bad drinking habit. You can have a habit of yelling in public. You can have a habit of not tying your shoes and tripping all the time. That seems unintentional. rhythms are very intentional. It's like that beating of the drum. Bump, 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 bump. It keeps you steady. It keeps the music going in all ways, and it creates that space. So if you will just set a few powerful rhythms in your life, like people say, if you had to, again, give just the top shelf, how do I ground my family life? I said, rhythmize around your most important relationships. And I have a good amount of rhythms now, not too many. I'm not talking 57 rhythms at home, because that's just too many, and then you'll feel imprisoned. But a few of them will keep you grounded. They'll save you from yourself. So 2 of mine, just obviously the family board meeting strategy. I have not missed a board meeting with any of my children in almost 8 years, and they continue to build and deepen us. And now the boys are going into their teen years, and I'm still talking to them, and it's wonderful. But another rhythm I have is date night with a question with my wife. Every week, Wednesday night, 5:30 to 8:30, I am unavailable. I am on a date with my wife, and we do a question where we joked before, Luke, how's the weather? Okay, we don't just talk about that. We pick one powerful question that will pull off some side-off line, and that's what we'll share. We'll be sure to do at least one powerful question. But every week, I'm doing that because, again, I remember I was told years ago, if you don't have enough time to keep dating your spouse, you don't have enough time to stay married. And that is a punch to the gut. So what I found, setting these just simple rhythms like date night with a question, the family board meeting strategy every 90 days, maybe a weekly meeting with your kids, maybe a overnight once a quarter with your wife. I'm just naming a few that I have. Once you start to schedule them, they're not that hard to keep up with. And if you just have a few powerful ones, don't think you have to have 3 dozen, maybe like 3 or 4 that you put into your life. See where you're actually at in 90 days, 6 months. You will be amazed, but you stay consistent with them. They are absolutely the secret sauce.
Absolutely. I think it's a wonderful description because it is, and again, we simplify at times just to help you guys remember, but what you schedule gets done. What you put into rhythm stays in motion. And that's what we're talking about right now. Don't make it hard on yourself. Don't, stop and, okay, well, this month I don't have anything planned. So now I've got to plan something. And okay, wait, I didn't schedule something. Now I got to start it again next month. And this isn't about starting over again and again and again and again. It's about making the choice and setting up a rhythm, a structure, a schedule, whatever you want to call it, that supports you in maintaining that. And, it like we talked about before, it's so much simpler than we make it out to be. This is one of those things, if you are really intrigued by this, this is something that's compelling, this is something I want to do, then choose to do it. Yeah. Right? And put it into practice.
And what I'd say, Luke, too, is I don't like to think a lot. So, because we're putting our creativity elsewhere. So this is simple, but it's a really powerful tip was I don't have to think about date night. It's every Wednesday night.
It's there.
It's every Wednesday night. Now, if we're traveling or something, maybe it get changed. But again, it just becomes so, again, rhythmic where if you're saying, well, maybe we'll do it Monday this week and then Thursday next week. No, pick a night and then schedule everything else around it. See, that's what I do. When you set a rhythm, everything else gets scheduled around it. Yeah. And that's going to keep you grounded, keep you from missing them, keep you from missed schedules and going, oh my gosh, it's been 4 months and we haven't gone on a date. And that's when problems really start to happen in marriages. And that's such an easy one to reground.
So let me ask you this, because I want to bring this kind of to a head of our conversation. And I wrap up usually in one of 2 ways. Sometimes I'll talk about what's the conversation that you'd love to see continue, meaning among those that are listening and within our community. But I think some of that's a little clear of where we'd like you to take this, where we'd like you to move this forward. So instead, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question.
Okay.
I'm curious if you could explain a little more deeply and more intimately of why you do what you do and how did you know that this was it for you?
Wow. Well, again, why I do what I do, I know we all have catalysts in our life. I think moments of clarity or awakening where we get put into, I forget who I was, it might have been my friend Philip McKernigan who said your gift is close to your wound. That was a very heavy time in my life, Luke, 8 years ago when my father was sick and I had to, rekindle our relationship, convince him to take a kidney. I'm adopting 2 boys. So that was a period of time where I just had a new level of awareness and focus and reprioritization. And I didn't want to share the family board meeting strategy, Luke. It was uncomfortable for my wife and I, and to her credit, she said, we have to share these results. This is too simple with too powerful results not to. Mm-hmm. But I cried on stage in front of 500 people the first time that I shared this. Mm-hmm. It was uncomfortable. But when I'd get the letters, when I'd get the phone calls saying, you don't know me, but, and that's what made it all worthwhile. I can make a lot more money in real estate than I do sometimes with the work I do with families. But this is my legacy. This is my work now. This helps my family. It helps other families. And I just feel in my groove. I just feel completely engaged when I'm working, and whether it's I'm on stage or I'm on a podcast with you or I'm in one of my 3-day retreats or in a workshop. This is my gift. This is what I was dealt, and it's almost like the universe or God, whatever. He has a sense of humor. Like, you didn't see this one coming, did you? Yeah. You didn't think 5 years ago you'd be doing this, but I am. So that's what it's there, and I just feel there's such a simple approach to reprioritizing and improving family life, and I have the ability to teach that. And I'm again with that drum I talked about. Yeah. I've now been staying on that mountain, Luke, just boom, 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 boom. And at first, no one's listening. No one. And you hear about, I think it was Simon Sinek, how to create a movement. Yeah. But now I've stayed on my mountain and saying, I'm going to help families. I'm going to help families. I work with entrepreneur families. Here's my lessons. Here's my lessons. And I've stayed, and it's not always overnight. But let me tell you, in the last 5 years, a lot of people have started to hear the drum, and I get to be a part of conversations like this one. So if you do find, if I can give that advice, if there is possibly a gift that's coming up close to a critical point in your life or a wound, it might not monetize right away. No one might hear you on that mountain playing your drum in the beginning, but stay there. Play the drum. Keep playing the drum. And that's when all of a sudden the wind comes to your back. And that's what I'm seeing now. And it's phenomenal. I'd feel so empty if I was only doing real estate investments still, because this work means so much more to me.
Jim, I'm so glad that you are doing this work, and we want to thank you for what you are doing, and we want to thank you for being here and sharing it with us.
No, I really appreciate you being here, Luke, and keep bringing the good ideas, this simple thing of one idea away. I mean, it really is. And hopefully we were on this short conversation being able to give one to the families out there that say, hey, I just feel ungrounded. Maybe this can give them a little more steadfast.
Excellent. So for everybody, again, this has been Jim Sheils and the Family Board Meeting. I really strongly encourage you to check that out. And just these kind of couple of closing thoughts. So in addition to all of this, clarity around how we really truly can move into deeper connection with those that we are closest to, and especially to our children, and how we can bake it into the rhythm of our life. That's really critically important. And also where we wrapped up, which is that be aware of some of the places that are uncomfortable for you, whether it be that wound or that challenge or that major point of stress, because at times that's actually where you need to go, to stay there, to be with that, to see what's there, to move through it, and then to be able to step into the uncomfortableness of sharing it, because there are so many other people that can benefit with what we move through. And some of those people that we're going to be able to share it with are even our own children. So as always, I want to thank you for tuning in to One Idea Away. And until next time, continue to enjoy the journey. Hey, as this episode is wrapping up, you may be asking yourself, what's next? Well, what's next? I hope that you've been joining in on the monthly live cast that we do for the One Idea Away community. You see, every single month, we gather some incredible guests that are talking about the types of transitions that they've made or are even in the midst of making to create a happier life, to create a life that's more aligned to who they truly are. So we're talking about happiness and purpose. We're talking about community. We're talking about how do we have that modern day success, meaning how do we succeed in our happiness, our well-being, our quality of life, while also making a great living, making the difference in the contributions that we are each meant to make. So when you get involved in the monthly live cast, you can ask some questions of our guests. You can participate with some of the other community members and the ongoing chat that just seems to explode as we get into these deeper conversations throughout the whole hour that we do this. So the only way, though, that you can get these special episodes is when you register for them. It is free, but you got to register to get involved and continue the conversations we're always talking about. So just hop on over to oneideaaway.com/livecast. That's oneideaaway.com/livecast. Join us there, get involved in the conversation, get involved in the community. I can't wait to continue the conversation with you. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you really enjoyed it, do me a favor, let us know. You can keep the conversation going and send us a message on our Facebook page, which is simply One Idea Away. Go ahead and tag me in the post or even just direct messages. Also, I would be incredibly grateful if you could share this episode along with someone that you believe could benefit from hearing the ideas and the messages that we got into. That's pretty much why we do this. So you can just go ahead and share it from your app or email it along, whatever works for you. The point is to share, to talk, to discuss, and keep the dialogue going, because it's in those conversations that ideas can take hold and create profound shifts in perspective. That's what allows us to live life more fully, deeply, and consciously. As always, we would love to see you post a review for the podcast in iTunes or whichever app you're using. And until next time, remember, you're never more than one idea away from a whole new reality. This is Luke Iorio and One Idea Away, signing off.